nicer weather right now, but we have not got the sunshine in Bristol today. So it's 4 o'clock now, so I think we will kick off the webinar. Thank you everybody who has joined. So today we've got a presentation for you on the theme of improving resource discovery for users. I will be your host, mostly kind of like in the background, making sure everything's running okay, but my name's Lauren, I'm Senior Marketing Officer at OpenAthens, and I'm joined today by Jon Bentley, Commercial Director, and Richard French, Product Manager at OpenAthens. I'm sure some of you might have seen Jon before, definitely. Okay, so just a bit of housekeeping to go through before we get started. So we are recording. Once we have the recording live on our YouTube channel, you guys will all have an email with the link to watch the recording again and just catch up on any points from the webinar that you'd like to revisit. Please can we ask that any questions that you have are posted in the Q&A box. Questions will be at the end of the webinar. You can post them anytime throughout, but just the Q&A box is a bit easier for us to keep track of, and will hopefully mean that your question is not missed at the end. And yeah, I think most of you are using it already, but just make use of the chat box for any general queries, anything to do with technology, anything like that. Just to make it clear for all of you guys as well, you are all on mute and we can't see you, so don't worry about any background noise or distractions. Yeah, I think everything else should all go quite smoothly. So I'm going to now pass over to Jon.
Thanks, Lauren. Thank you for your optimism as well. I think everything will go smoothly. I think I'm Jon. I'm the Commercial Director from OpenAthens. So good morning or good afternoon or good evening to wherever you are in the world. So we've got, I don't think it'll take much more than half an hour, maybe more, depending on sort of the questions and how in depth or in detail we get to. So I'm just going to take a moment to position OpenAthens where internally we see ourselves, talk about where we are today, why we exist. And then I'm going to take a little bit of time talking about how we're expanding our focus to understand much more about our end users and how they access resources. And when I'm talking about end users, by that I mean it could be students, it could be doctors, it could be nurses, scientists or engineers or patrons or citizens within the community. So I'm going to start I'm just going to talk quickly about our mission. So we see ourselves very much in that scholarly information space, that learning space, the sort of the information economy almost in the world. And when we're working, we remove barriers to knowledge. So if you are a doctor and there's clinical research that you need to access, we want to do that as efficiently and as friction-free as possible. So we talk about removing barriers to knowledge. So we have the libraries on one side, who are a key constituent and key community. They have their users that they need to connect to the resources. We have the publishers, who are another aspect of our community, and they need to give subscribers access to those resources. And then we sit in the middle, facilitating those connections. And we have an array of products and applications in the background, if you like, that actually creates this service. But at the most of the time, we talk about OpenAthens as a library service. So that's helping the information managers or the librarians managing access for the learners and researchers within their institution or organization to all the content that they're subscribing to or they're licensed to see. We have the OpenAthens Federation, which at its most simplest is just a big list. We'll sometimes refer to it as the trust fabric, if you like, but it's a bit like a big list. So you can imagine if it was a nightclub, there would be security on the door, and it's kind of saying, if you're not on that list, you're not coming in. And that's essentially what that does. And then we're also recently developed our service, and that's kind of the main focus of this webinar is MyAthens. So that's our library-owned information portal. When it says library-owned, it's kind of used and set up by the library. So that library-owned information portal that gives learners and users a friendly starting point for research. So that's kind of a whistle through our products and how we talk about them. Our vision is to be the world's most user-friendly information access management experience. And I think there's a realization, certainly maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it was very driven by the technology, it was very driven by the software. You would hear words like federation or SAML or shibboleth, and actually we've tried to move away from that and really focus on the simple things. So for the library, it's about single sign-on and about remote access, and indeed that focus on remote access, that off-campus access to resources has really grown over the last 2 or 3 years because of the pandemic. We want to work with vendors or providers or publishers or platforms, so they've got the simplest access solution at their disposal, and that's where the federation comes in. And actually, this is where we're developing and evolving. We want to understand more about the learners, researchers, and how we help them access knowledge whenever and wherever they need it. So it's kind of the login made simple. That's kind of one of our key goals. And then also the people who use it. So we have about 80 customers. No, so we have more customers than that. We have customers in about 80 countries, but obviously they have a very distributed community. So actually what we see about 200 million users a month going through OpenAthens. That's about 150 million transfers. Now, not all of those transfers are successful, because it comes back, the securities are there saying, if you're not on the list, you're not coming in. So we would call those turnaways. So we take many people to the websites where they discover they don't have access or they don't have the right credentials, but that's about 150 million a month. And that's from 193 countries. So we really are global. And while I'm sitting here in Bristol, in the UK, what's great to see is so many people joining from around the world. I think more or less most years, we see accesses from students, learners, professionals in every single country in the world. But we recognize it can still be confusing. There are industry organizations such as Seamless Access, which kind of exist purely to try and unwind the complexity about someone, a learner and an institution, trying to access the specific curated content that they have rights to access through that library portfolio for their institution's subscriptions. And what I was doing when I was thinking about this presentation, looking at the work we've done on MyAthens, I'm going to take you back in time to 2015. So I joined OpenAthens in 2015. So this is some of the earliest work that I've done. So I'm going to take the time to step through this slide because it is quite confusing. The key things to focus on are you've got the little person in the bottom left-hand corner with the head, with his head in the shape of sort of a tablet, and that's the individual or the end user, and they're trying to access those resources or journals, which is in the top right-hand corner. And this maps out, from a very technical perspective, it maps out the journey that they may or may not go on to get through to their resources. So you've got the institutions on the left-hand side, and you've got the kind of the publisher access on the right-hand side. So certainly previously, where you were was kind of the key determinant of whether or not you could access content. So that's the concept of the IP range. If the IP range was recognized because of where you were, you could have access. Now that's changed in the kind of the cloud world or the online world. It doesn't matter where you are, that's not so important. Our chief architect likes to say that identity is now the firewall. So actually being able to establish that identity about who you are and what permissions you have are the key things about access. So location is not as important as it used to be. Where you are, there might be network access or Wi-Fi issues. The research, I'm going to talk in a moment about some research that we did, which was global, and there's that recognition. And it's, in fact, even in the UK and in North America, for example, it's the same. Not everybody has uniform access to the internet. So there are issues of digital equity that we need to be aware of. People have different devices. People may or may not know how to use the sort of the services that they have access to. One of our biggest customers in the UK is the National Health Service. And actually what we see is those doctors, student doctors and nurses who go through their sort of 4 or 5 years worth of training, they are some of the best researchers and users of that, users of the material, because they have had in-depth training about how they can get to and how they can understand and work their way through the different resources. And then you get to log in. That's at the publisher front door, and you might not remember what your username and password is. You might have many usernames and passwords. That's kind of one of the key reasons for OpenAthens about 20 years ago, is that people had so many usernames and passwords they can remember what they were. But once you've logged in, you actually might get there, and actually your institution might not have a subscription. You might not be recognized. I'm going to just quickly go through, and actually, if you go to that little blue box, one of the things that we still really see is that 4040, that link rot. That realization is, even as you're wending your way through that digital landscape, you might be aiming at a destination or a point that no longer exists because the vendor or the publisher will have changed their links. So you're successfully on the site, and that site might be designed for the individual user, rather for that person who is, for that individual publication, rather than for that user who is on that journey, moving across many, many different research resources as part of their learning. And then finally, you get to the journal or the article, the specific piece of information that you were looking at. Now, so what struck me when I was looking at that is how technical that was. And I'm just going to flag up something, a book that a colleague of mine, Christina, wrote. Christina's now left, but this was a fantastic resource that I think she wrote about 3 or 4 years ago. It's still available. So if you Google access to online resources, a guide for the modern librarian by Christina, you'll find this book. And within that, there's a superb section on troubleshooting e-resources, which kind of works you through that. So you can actually, if there is something wrong, it could happen at any one of those stages. But that realization that our goal is to get Mr. Lozenge Head to the resources that he needs is at the heart of what we do. But we need to understand it more from a UX, user experience perspective. So we launched some research at the end of 2021 to really understand the motivations and the workflows of end users. So what was driving them to do the research? What were they doing when they were undertaking that research, rather than the technical aspects of the blockers. So what did we do? We talked to 15 researchers and 9 learners. These were in-depth conversations, and what we wanted to speak to those people we hadn't spoken to before. So we really cast the net really, really wide, looking to talk to people in different regions and different countries who we know would have different experiences. Because if you think back to that 193 customers, our worldview very much until the last 2 or 3 years ago had been very Western focused, very UK focused, very English language focused. And we need to change that. We know that we need to adopt and evolve. So the conversations that we had, they were Zoom calls. They lasted for about an hour. As I said, they were run by our partner Digirati, who did the work for us. And we wanted to explore, why did people start their research? What were those triggers that drove them? How did they know where to go? What pathways did they take? What were their user journeys? And really, really importantly for us, what were the pain points and the barriers that stopped them getting to the information that they needed to get to? And that comes about that removing barriers to knowledge. And we talked about what the future might look like, and actually really zoned in on the jobs that they were trying to do. And off the back of this, we created what we call personas. And this persona, there was 4 or 5 personas. This one is for a researcher who had access to resources. Many of the people we spoke to in the sort of some of the more far-flung regions didn't necessarily have easy or simple access to a portfolio of learning or resources. And what I want you to focus on here are those pain points and the barriers. So that's that grey box in the middle of the screen. So for many of them, there was no single place for them to start to find existing research. They were limited by paywalls. They found it difficult to get to the information that they needed. Often the library portal was not as user-friendly or as easy to use as it could be. And that put some barriers in place. There's this concept of predatory or ghost journal. So they couldn't always be assured of the quality of the research they were accessing. and then we moved further on into the work. So new areas for us as OpenAthens, really understanding how they manage that research workflow, including citations, and embedding that into the work they were doing, and also tracking what they'd already looked at and how they could go back to see what they had or hadn't read. So that was the kind of the level of detail of understanding we were looking for. And what was interesting across the world, it's great to see, great for us certainly, that there are common themes and common challenges that we can look to help with over into the future. So I talked a bit about digital equity earlier on, and that lack of access to certain journals was a real key challenge for many people. The whole open access movement is important. They want quality information to be free at the point of use. There were aspects where they wanted to avoid the library portal. I wasn't sure if I should share that with this particular group, but I think it's important to recognise that there are challenges about the way the information online is assimilated and presented back to the end user groups. And actually, I suppose what everyone's goal is to have a really good starting point for that access. There were gaps in their research. They weren't always able to identify what they needed to see. There was one conversation we had with somebody who had done a number of months of research only to discover right at the very end that actually the research he was doing had already been done. He just hadn't been able to find that particular paper and they had been working on. I think that the importance of the library in terms of curation and training and that kind of information intelligence about how do you know what is quality, how do you know the best place to go, that was really, really important. And then for us, it's that one seamless process. It's kind of what role does OpenAthens have in that end-to-end journey? How can we work with our partners in the libraries? How can we work with our partners and the learning providers and the other federations around the world to actually make sure that the journey is as simple and as seamless as it can be? How do you find content easily? How do you identify the journey? And how do you integrate and cite those resources? So those were the executives. So those are the key themes across all the people we spoke to. It was easy to see that there were patterns that were recognisable that we could work to try and improve. And that was the work. That was the work we're doing. And actually, that was the starting point. It wasn't the starting point, but we've taken a lot of that learning, and what we want to be able to do is to integrate that with the services that we develop as we develop them. And if you go back to the OpenAthens for Libraries and the Federation and MyAthens, this is where I'm going to pass over to Richard to talk about how we've taken that learning and we're trying to integrate it within the service that we have for MyAthens, which essentially is a sort of a simple end user library portal. So Richard, I'm going to stop talking and pass over to you if that's okay.
Yes, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. I'm Richard French, product manager for MyAthens. And as John said, I'm going to talk through some of the ways MyAthens facilitates discovery. Some of you might be familiar with MyAthens, others less so. So to introduce it briefly, as John said at the beginning, it's a library owned. So that means used and set up information portal that provides a user-friendly starting point for research. And it's intended for librarians who need a simple and easy way to show their users what resources they can access. So, as John mentioned, in that study we conducted last year, it was highlighted that many learners and researchers have difficulty accessing the resources they need. They don't know where to find resources. It's not always clear to them what their institution holds a subscription to. It's not always clear which credentials are required to sign into a service. And in these cases, learners and researchers might not make use of the curated high quality resources that their library subscribes to. Instead, they may devise their own suboptimal search methods. So MyAthens aims to alleviate aspects of this issue and remove that barrier to accessing resources. So the main feature within MyAthens is the resource list, and this, through its integration with OpenAthens, allows libraries to easily generate a personalized list of resources that users have access to. And then around that, customize a really intuitive UX and library portal experience that they can augment with videos and images, any useful institutional information like library opening times, and any other guidance that they want to provide for their users. So what does this mean in reality for a learner or researcher using MyAthens? Well, their experience would be they would log into MyAthens, which activates their authentication session. They're then shown a list of the publishers or the providers that their library has a subscription to, with further information within there on specific journals that are available through that publisher. And then clicking on any of those from that list will take the end user directly to the provider's website, where they won't need to sign in again because their OpenAthens session is still running. And then there they can start looking for the specific journals and articles they're interested in. And so also highlighted on that slide that John shared, the executive summary from the study, there was around that desire from end users for an element of curation in their e-resource discovery. So, beyond just knowing which resources they have access to, those end users want help identifying those resources that are most relevant to them, or useful, or come highly rated. And this might particularly be the case if your library has lots of subscriptions. So the full list of resources won't be relevant to all of your users. And we want to make that discovery as simple as possible. So in MyAthens, if a librarian wants to make a more focused list for a particular group of users around an area like science, then they can create a curated resource list to highlight the most important or relevant resources for those particular users. And any resource that's in the library's OpenAthens catalogue can be added to that curated list, but they will only be displayed to end users if the resource and the user share a permission set. So the users will only be shown resources they have access to. So there won't be any research dead ends. So yeah, also in the study, it was showed that researchers worry about not being able to identify research gaps because the resources are hard to discover or access, and it's vitally important for them to be able to see all relevant articles. So I think that's why the MyAthens integration with discovery services is such a key feature. So we want to be able to make sure that users can see in MyAthens not only their subscription-based content, but also have an easy means to cast their search further using trusted discovery services such as EBSCO, EDS, and Core. And Core is the newest discovery service MyAthens has integrated. So this was launched at the end of 2021. And a particularly exciting one, I feel, because as I said, one of the key features of MyAthens is to show users all their subscription-based content they have access to in one place. But obviously, subscription-based content isn't the only content that's out there. There's a whole universe of open access content that users also have access to. So this is really helping us to live up to that mission for MyAthens to be that starting point for research. So we think it's important that we increasingly show to users the full breadth of the content they have access to. And so our integration with a discovery service like Core means MyAthens can offer open access content alongside paid for subscription content, and be able to offer those two parts of the content universe really helps facilitate discovery. So also in that research that we undertook last year, as John mentioned as well, students and researchers were finding their online search efforts frustrated by clunky or hard to navigate library portals. We heard in that study as well that they didn't always use their library portals as the first port of call because they might be too complex or difficult to use. Whatever discourages users from curated sources encourages the use of untrusted ones. So this was front of mind when OpenAthens was redeveloped. OpenAthens redeveloped MyAthens last year. So the previous version was, I think it was about sort of 15 years old and had a number of usability and accessibility issues. So we undertook that process, was a complete user-focused redesign. You know, the key priority throughout was how can we provide the best user experience for learners and researchers, end users, as well as the OpenAthens administrators. So before we started, we conducted user research, so interviews, surveys, testing with librarians and end users. And the insights from that research helped us design and build an information portal that provides, so as I mentioned before, a user-friendly starting point for research, but also for librarians, a simple and easy way to use product that cuts down on setup and maintenance. I think that's a key aspect of it as well. And one of the things that we heard in that particular bit of user research as well was it quite clear the importance of having MyAthens fully mobile optimized, which means users can conduct their research and access resources on the go and on any devices. And so this is true for digital natives, lots of things on their phones, but also we know that in certain countries and regions where the default is mobile. So if you're interested in finding out updates on improvements we're making to MyAthens, any new features we're releasing, or see what's coming next, I suggest taking a look at our product journal. You know, we are looking to continuously make improvements to MyAthens, and to make sure we're making the improvements that are most valuable to our users and customers, we need your feedback. So if you are already a MyAthens customer, have some feedback you'd like to share, or you know, for example, an idea on a discovery service we should integrate with, please get in touch with me directly, or alternatively, if you'd like to sign up to take part in future user research, you can add your details to a link that I think Lauren might share in the chat shortly. So yeah, I look forward to hearing from you, and thanks for listening. So I think it's time for questions.
Thanks, Richard. That's perfect. And I'm just about to drop the link in the chat now. So if you'd like to sign up, yeah, to be part of any user research, then that would obviously be really, really great. We'd love to hear from you and what you think about MyAthens and other products that we are developing. So yeah, any questions, please add them to the Q&A box. And then, yeah, we can get those answered for you. Okay, looks like we've had one in so far, which just is, what is the process for integrating new discovery services, and do you have a view on how long that might take?
I think it's a case-by-case basis that there will be, it depends on the setup of the discovery service, as I understand. So what was the second part of the question?
Do you have a view on how long that might take?
Oh, yeah, I think that's, that's the case. But yeah, if there is a discovery service that's interested in integrating, then yeah, please get in contact and we can have that discussion offline.
We've had another one in that just asked, is core aligned with JISC? How does being part of JISC affect OpenAthens? Which might be one for John.
Yeah, so core is one of the services that have been developed by the sort of the digital resources team within JISC. So JISC as an organisation in the UK, it's our national NREN, includes our Janet network and the digital resources team, and there are teams who lead experts, in fact, in the field of open access. So we are aligned to core. In terms of how that helps, that integration wouldn't have happened so early if we didn't have those contacts within the same organisation. I think there's also the UK Access Management Federation, which is managed by JISC, And that's really helping us understand the importance of interoperability across federations. It's helping us understand our relationship with EduGain and actually how we can sort of grow the service to make it simpler for people to access wherever they are in the world. I hope that answers the question, but so we're part of JISC. It's really beneficial in terms of having a deepening and developing OpenAthens understanding of open access and the importance of open access and what those opportunities are.
Perfect, thank you. We have a question from Michelle. What is the benefit to the researcher of logging into MyAthens and accessing resources and discovery services there, like EDS, versus going to a library homepage and accessing EDS for the same purpose?
I'll be honest, I don't know how to answer that question.
I'll have a go. I mean, I think so. So MyAthens is, let's be clear, is not for everybody, because we know that there are many of the larger institutions, particularly, who have their own library websites and their own library portals that do the job. Where we see MyAthens having the greatest success is for those people who need a simpler solution, a sort of less heavyweight solution. So actually, I would love to see a scenario where MyAthens was almost like a widget or a component that sat within an existing library, because the key benefit is that the authentication that is triggered as you go through it. So not only are those resources there in one place, but if you're already in that authenticated state, once you hit the portal and you continue on your journey, you're logged in and you will have access to those resources that you need to have access to without having to repeatedly log in. I think that was how I would answer that question. There's more to it, there, isn't it? Yeah, so for example, EDS may be just one service that sits within that portfolio of services. So actually, we're just a sort of a launch point or a starting point for that research journey in most instances. And by coming through MyAthens, you're in that healthy signed-in state that enables single sign-on.
Thanks, John. That's great. Another question that just asks, are MyAthens resources controlled only from admin.openathens.net and then via resources and catalogue?
That's right. It pulls the information from the resource catalogue within the admin area of OpenAthens.
Also, just to definitely clear everything up, yes, this has been recorded and we will be sending out the recording via email probably later on this week. Don't know if we've got any more questions. We'll give it a few minutes just in case anyone else has got anything else. Okay, so we've got another one following on from the last question. So does the access URL in the catalogue entries affect patron access outside MyAthens?
Yeah. So I'm going to attempt to answer that in terms of, we sometimes hear the concept of having an Athenized link. So if the URL in the catalogue isn't redirectable, for example, that's a redirector as a tool within OpenAthens, then yes, that patron access wouldn't work. So if you're not in a logged in state and you hit a particular URL, you will be challenged for your identity. However, if you're already logged in and that URL recognizes you, you will be allowed to pass straight through to the research or the information that you need. So it does depend on the construct of the URL in the catalogue.
Perfect, thanks, John. Another one that just asks, what's integration with NHS Knowledge and Library Hub in terms of seamless access to resources?
So I think that's a question that we would need to take away to look at the specifics. I do know that we're working closely with the NHS trusts in the UK to understand how we can best integrate and best use the NHS. So what I'm hopeful of is that those library trusts that are working with us will be able to find an answer to that question. Pal, I don't know if you know, or if you had conversations with Phil Leahy, but certainly that's a question we'll take away from the webinar, but that's also something that we'd be able to raise directly with Phil.
Yeah, I've just made a note of that question, so we can follow up with you post webinar about that one. But yeah, really great question. I don't know if anyone else has any more questions they'd like to post in the Q&A box. Give it a couple of minutes.
Hope it stopped raining in Loughborough.
Okay, perfect. Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions for today, but thank you ever so much for everyone who's joined us today. I hope you found this webinar really, really useful. As I mentioned earlier, we will be sending out a link to the recording. So yeah, you can catch up, and also feel free to share it with colleagues, and any links that have been mentioned within this webinar, they will be included in the post-webinar follow-up. So keep an eye out for that one. But yeah, thank you all so much for attending, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day or evening or morning, whatever time it is for you guys out there. And thank you also to the presenters today. Thanks everyone. Bye.